For those of you who fancy yourself tournament chess players, one thing you got to learn how to do is keep score, keep notation of the game. Write the moves down. Generally, we have a score sheet, something like this. We write down the name of the event. Let's take the Midwest Class Championship, which took place in Chicago a short time ago. The date of the tournament, the section. Some chess tournaments have more than one section. Scholastic sections, sections for higher rated players. This section was the open section, which was the top section. This game was played in round 4. Most chess tournaments have rounds, round 1, round 2. Those are the matches you play. Also, most tournaments have board numbers. That way you know where to find your board. This was played on board 6. And the time control. If you use a chess clock like this one, you'll have to use a time control. This one was 40 moves in 2 hours, followed by sudden death in 1 hour. Okay, so that means the game could actually go 6 hours. Luckily, this game took much less. My opponent had the white pieces. We put him next to the white pawn. His name was Al Chow, and I had the black pieces. Generally, when you keep score, there's a carbon copy. And what you do is you keep your score when your game is done, and you turn in the carbon to the tournament organizers. That way your chess games could get published all over the world in chess magazines and books, and there's a record of your game. Now, this column on the left is for the white moves. The column on the black is for the black moves. White moves first, move 1. My opponent played pawn to e4. This is the algebraic coordinate notation system. Each square on the chessboard has a letter and a number associated with it. This is the A line, the B line, the C line, and so forth, till the H line. And this is the first rank, the second rank, all the way to the 8th rank. So if we look at a random square like this one, we will see this is D5. A, B, C, D, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so when we write down our moves, we write down the name of the piece that's moved, followed by its algebraic coordinate. For some reason, when the algebraic system was invented, they decided that when you move pawns, you would write nothing instead of writing a P for pawn. So when I play pawn to E4, I simply write E4. My opponent played E4. I played pawn to C5, and now he played knight to F3. For those of you in the know, you will notice that the word knight starts with a K. Unfortunately, king also starts with K, so if you wrote K to F3, you wouldn't know which piece moved there. Therefore, in the great wisdom of the algebraic system, we decided to use the letter N for knight. So NF3 is knight to F3. I played knight to C6. Notice how when we use a letter and a number, the letters are small, the letter E, the letter F. When we talk about a piece, like the bishop, the queen, or the king, those letters are capitalized. So for the knight, we have a capital N, and my opponent played D4. Now we have another interesting move. I captured his pawn on D4, and so what I do is I write my C pawn, takes his D pawn, and when I capture something, I write a little X. C takes D4. If you see an X on a score sheet, that means a capture. My opponent's knight captured on D4. I played knight F6. My opponent played knight C3, and I played pawn to D6. My opponent played pawn to F3. I played pawn to E6. My opponent played bishop to E3. Notice how the B in bishop is capitalized because that's the name of a piece. I played pawn to A6. He played pawn to G4, and I played queen to C7. Notice the capital Q for queen. My opponent played queen to D2. Notice how white's moves all go on this column, black's moves on this column. I then played the move knight to D7. Now, my opponent made an interesting move, which is difficult to write down in algebraic notation. He castled. When we castle, we write either 2 zeros or 3 zeros, depending on which side you castle. My opponent castled the long way, so 0, 0, 0. That indicates long castling. Now here I made an interesting move. I moved my knight to E5. However, both of my knights could go to E5. So I have to denote which one went to E5. I have a knight on the C file and a knight on the D file. So I wrote knight on D to E5. My knight on the C file could also go to E5, so this way you know which one. My opponent played queen F2. I played B5. King to B1. We use K for king. Notice how it's a capital K. Rook to B8. My opponent played bishop to D3. I played bishop to D7. He played pawn to G5. I played bishop to E7, my other bishop. pawn to h4. And now, on move 10, white castled queenside, I castled kingside the short way, so I just write 2 zeros. That means castles. My opponent played queen to g2. And now, just like on move 10, when I played my knight on the d line to e5, I had another opportunity to move 2 pieces to the same square. This time it was my rook. Both of my rooks can go to c8. So one rook was on the f file, one rook was on the b file. This is the f file here, this is the b file. I moved my rook on the f file to c8. My opponent played pawn to h5, and now some more captures occurred in the game. Knight takes d4, bishop takes d4, we use the x for takes. I played b4, attacking my opponent's knight. Remember, I didn't write the name of a piece, so for b4, that's pawn to b4. My opponent played knight to e2. Notice the capital N for knight. I played pawn to b3, sacrificing a pawn, trying to checkmate his king. He played pawn to c3. And now we see another new move in our notation. My b pawn takes his a2 pawn with check. How do we denote check? Generally, we write a plus sign. B takes e2 check. His king is in check. Of course, he moved his king to a1. In this position, I sacrificed my rook. Rook takes b2. Notice the capital R for rook. King takes my rook on b2. I checked his king again. Knight takes d3 check. Rook takes d3. Rook to b8 check. King. Mistake. Luckily, pencils have erasers. King to a1. And now I played queen to b7 with unstoppable checkmate. My queen on b7 is threatening queen b2 checkmate and queen b1 checkmate. In this position, my opponent's time ran out. We had 40 moves to make in 2 hours. We're on move 24. My opponent has 16 moves to go, and he didn't make it. So his time ran out, so we usually write time forfeit. And black won the game, so we write 0 for white and 1 for black. If white had won the game, we write 1-0. If it's a draw, we just write a half. Generally, you circle your name when you win the game. That way the people in the tournament know who won. And we have a place on the bottom here where you can sign your name. So I would sign Ben Finegold. I would give the score sheet to my opponent. He would give me his score sheet, and he would sign Al Chow. And we would turn the score sheets in. And this is what a completed chess score sheet looks like. Sometimes when you first start, you make mistakes, but you improve, you get better, and your score sheets are real nice and easy to read, and you can replay the game later at home.